I'm going turkey.
I wouldn't worry about it. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. It'll be fine where it is. Get there when it gets there.
All right, good afternoon. It is 11:30. We'll get started here on time. Thank you for joining us at Polk County Emergency Management and the Emergency Operations Center for our lunch and learn on ESF 3 and debris management. I'm going to start with my introduction and kind of a view of what we've got here laid out in the EOC for you today. I'm Brett McIntyre, training and exercise lead here with Polk County Emergency Management Agency. This is our EOC. If you haven't been here or it's been a while, I'll give you kind of the quick rundown. If you need the restrooms at any point, go back out to the way you came here through the front office, take a left down the hallway and a second left, and they are on the exact opposite sides here of our two conference rooms, C13 and C14. That's where the restrooms are located. If you need something to drink or an additional snack, you can go through the front door or back door here into our break room. There's vending machines in there. You go straight through to the hallway. On the outside of the break room there is a water bottle, a refilling station. So you can get some refreshment there if needed. If we need to evacuate the EOC for any reason, again, the easiest way is back out the way you came or right out through the front entrance there with Patty. If that exit is unavailable for any reason, we can go out the side here. Emergency exit here will take us through public health and out the south side of the building. Other than that, we do have coffee available here over on the side table of the room that you can feel free to help yourself to at any point here during the lunch and learn. But with that, I'll go ahead and get started with what we're here to talk about today in emergency support function 3. Public Works and Engineering is one of the 15 chapters basically of our comprehensive emergency plan. We've got to go through several of them each year. 20% of the plan needs to be updated each year. So ESF 3 is in progress for its rewrite and eventual submission to the Emergency Management Commission and the state. Cameron Stufflebeam is leading that process for ESF 3, so he'll be part of our panel from Emergency Management. We also have Russ Paul, Public Works in Pleasant Hill, and Leslie Earlbeck from Metro Waste Authority here today as well. I'm going to talk about some of the things that are coming up as we go through rewriting the plan, how to activate the plan, some of the challenges and successes that we had last year. Obviously, we had numerous different storms across the metro and really across the state that impacted both Polk County, also Metro Waste Authority with debris coming from elsewhere into their process. So a lot of different kind of aspects and things to talk about and kind of best practices that we are hoping to see with our plan here for our jurisdictions that are within Polk County. So with that, I'll toss it to Cameron. He can give us a little bit more on what's happening with ESF 3, and then he can pick who the next victim is to go talking.
Victim. Wow. Okay, is this thing working? Yes, no, okay. Cameron Stubbling, Polk County Emergency Management. See some of my guard contingent here as well. Also a member of the, no longer the 132nd, but the Joint Operations Center. So numerous disasters occurred statewide last year. Some of the problems that we run into a lot of times are we get out, we do the damage assessment really quick, which gives us an idea of how much debris we've actually got. We don't a lot of times know total amounts of debris or what kind of strategy we are going to be using until after we've gone out and done those damage assessments. So the debris management plan is a way to take those debris quantities, the debris types, and put it in a workable, feasible manner to clean up after disaster. This could be vegetative debris, this could be white goods, it could be flood debris. So it's not really limited to any one particular type or one particular disaster. It's across the county and across the area. Again, we saw several different disasters last year here within the metro, most of them being tornadoes. But we also had snow debris that we had to clear in January. Northern Iowa saw a lot of flood debris to the point where they were actually calling in state resources. So how that process, just a real quick overview on that. if we get to a point where the local community can't handle it, we can call in the county resources, and I don't want to steal too much of your thunder here. We can call in county resources and the county could come in and assist. We've done this several different times over the years between tornadoes, derecho, flooding, things of that nature. If the county gets overwhelmed as well, we can call in the state. It'll start with the DOT as they have transportation corridors, they have the equipment and everything like that. If it goes beyond that and the state can't do it, the National Guard has assets that could also be used. We can call in other counties as well. So it all depends on the magnitude and the scope of what we're looking at. With that, there are some additional requirements. There's going to be additional teams and things like that. Ultimately, where we have the ultimate goal of is getting rid of it off the street, which is great. You may have to do a temporary siting location. You may have to figure out where it's going to go. Ultimately, in Polk County, we send a lot of ours to Metro Waste. When we have disasters that affect the entire region, like we did last year, Metro Waste may not have the ability or the capacity at the time to take all that debris at one time. So we've got to play that balance game a little bit. That's kind of, I'm going to set the stage a little bit, then I'm going to hand it off. So with that, I know you've got a presentation.
Yep. Russ Paul, Public Works Director, City of Pleasant Hill. Threw together some slides here to just kind of go over what we experienced last year. So almost a year ago today, we had a EF2 tornado that pretty much went right through Pleasant Hill, obviously southwest to northeast, kind of transect through there. Here's just kind of a map showing the damage that we sustained. Over 120 structures impacted, with around about 15 that were pretty severely damaged in the process. Some quick overview pictures to kind of give reference of the area and how it all kind of lays out that the damage that was sustained. A couple more pictures on the next slide too, just gives a little bit of scope, I guess, to what we were dealing with following the tornado. So our cleanup efforts consisted of, we had 2 city crews out. And when I mean crews, we're talking 1 equipment operator loading, and then there's about 3 dump trucks hauling for each of the crews. Like Cameron mentioned, we did have Polk County help out with this event, which was substantially helpful for us. A lot of their equipment is obviously a lot larger than our community's equipment, so we were using 2 to 3 of their crews in addition to our 2 city crews. One of their crews, I call it storm debris. I have vegetated debris, storm debris. So this just kind of the language that I use for this, but one of their crews was essentially there for storm debris, the debris from houses and everything else that kind of gets blown around. There wasn't, the green vegetative debris. We were doing separate piles is how we had it voiced out to all the residents, have separate piles on the curbside for collection with storm and vegetative debris. Obviously, that was not the case at all events. A lot of people commingled those piles. We treated the commingled piles like they were complete storm pile, debris piles, so we wouldn't handle those. A lot of our first early passes through the community were to collect a lot of that vegetative debris. Easier to handle. The storm debris, was sharp and it was a little bit more tricky to deal with. We loaded all of the vegetative debris curbside throughout the entirety of this event. We did load at the beginning in roll-offs provided by Metro Waste Authority, the storm debris along the curb. We found as that went along, it worked really well to put those containers in areas that had heavy hit areas where the storm debris was significant. But as we were picking those piles and minimizing that to the point to where we'd have to move those roll-off units, we decided it would be better off to transport the storm debris down to our collection site where the vegetative debris was going for the entirety of the time. Daily cleanup. So we were weekdays. This event hit on a Friday night. So Saturday, our main goal was essentially to get the debris off of the road so Mid-American Energy could come in and get utilities, power all back up and running. And that was kind of our main focus. So we had a little bit of time to catch our breath from when the tornado hit to starting the collection that following Monday. And we collected every day of the week, or Monday through Friday through May 14th. And then at that point in time, we pretty much had our hand around what we were doing as far as a collection point. So we just pushed the cleanup to just Monday and Tuesday for the last couple weeks. And by May 28th, so just about a little over a month from when the event happened, we had all the debris piles picked up. So all total, a little over 13,000 cubic yards of vegetative debris. That would be the trees, the green stuff, the logs. Storm debris collected was a little over 1,500 cubic yards. Again, collected and pretty much exclusively by Polk County. The picture there on the lower left is just kind of an example. We have single axle dump trucks. They're hauling, 8 cubic yards a load. So to keep that in perspective, Polk County's, their tandem axle trucks, they're a lot bigger. They're hauling double that, and they can load their equipment. They can load things up pretty quick too. So a big part of debris management is messaging out to the public. We had the event hit on a Friday night. Saturday, people were already working to get stuff out to the curb before the messaging could really start rolling out. So we want to try to get that messaging out. We started coordinating with, Polk County, Metro Waste to try to get a plan in place. So we were pushing out these messages to try to let the public know that debris collections were going to start that following Monday. We're going to be making multiple trips to that site. So don't be, worried if a crew's already went through and cleared all the debris off the curb. There was still more opportunity to get that picked up throughout this cleanup period. And then also that 211, we want to try to push that message out too. So that's pretty much on all the communications that we've pushed out through that time. And then also our communication specialist was pushing out kind of updates to the public daily. So you can see on the dates there on the top of those communications that, just kind of giving them a recovery recap, how much debris was hauled. And then you can see, in contrast, what Polk County has at their disposal versus Pleasant Hill. So having their help to collect in that lower left picture there, that was pretty substantial when we're talking about moving stuff off the curb and getting things hauled to the collection site. But just trying to get the message out to the public, make sure they're aware that we're out, we're working, we're going to be back. And then again, keep pushing the 211 number for assistance. So there's always extra that happens with tornadoes. So for us, the extra included the tornado went right through our cemetery. So 89 monuments in the cemetery were damaged as part of that tornado. 30% of the tree canopy was destroyed. We had a couple oaks in there that were over 100 years old. So they were massive in size that went down with that tornado. Typically, you have the people that were directly impacted by the tornado from the tornado path. When you deal with something like this, you have family 10, 100 miles away that are impacted by the tornado as well, because their loved one's monument is impacted by that event. So that was a little additional kind of a work that we had to deal with following that tornado. Cemetery Creek project, that's that creek there on the east side of the cemetery. It's a drainage tributary, drains about a little less than a third of the community. We had a stormwater improvement project lined up for that creek restoration. It involved not a whole lot of tree clearing. After the tornado, it was pretty much just clear cut through there. A lot of those trees were laying on their sides. A lot of the property owners, the city has kind of that lower end of that tributary, but the property owners on the other side, a lot of those trees were laying in their yards. So we were fortunately able to kind of expedite getting that project going. And you can kind of see in that bottom picture where a lot of that cleanup effort was put. We broke the project down into 2 phases, essentially, with the first phase of a clearing and grubbing phase to get all that tree debris brought out of there, which was really helpful for the residents along there because they were the ones on the front lines as far as getting hit with the tornado. our spring cleanup day was April 27th and the tornado hit on 26th. So everyone bringing out all their debris that they were going to get rid of as part of their spring cleanup, that went everywhere. So in addition to all of the debris that was taken from homes and yards, it was everybody else's debris they put out on the curb as well. So it was kind of a bad timing for all that to happen. And then at the very end, we didn't meet the threshold for public assistance. So FEMA did not help us out with that. So total cost was, over $250,000 that the city had to deal with. And that's excluding the in-kind services with volunteer help and everything, all the other efforts that we were fortunate enough to receive through the process.
Yes, but that's not.
So from the city's perspective, kind of how I see lessons learned, I think, we've experienced this statewide for the derecho, kind of laid a lot of the foundation, I know for me and for us handling this, but communication was critical. Getting that message out to the residents, especially early on, to help them sort out the piles, just something just as simple as that to kind of help keep the cleanup efforts going a little bit more smooth as we go through there. We tried to push that message out early and often. Another thing is communicate to staff. You have to keep in mind when you're sending your staff out to collect these piles, that's where the residents are going first. Some of them, they don't have access to public communication because their internet's down. So they're kind of relying on friends, family, and then also the city staff and county staff there. So we had every morning, we would talk about what the plan of operations were that day, giving them kind of talking points so they can talk to residents that approach them about, we're going to be back, keeping up with that messaging. The use of message boards was very helpful. We had some help there with the city of Altoona to kind of help push that message through. People that are impacted directly, we found they don't go online during that time. Their main goal is to try to clean things up, try to get things back to normal. So they're not paying attention to those things as much as they are driving to the store and back or to the gas station and back or family members coming in to help. They see the message boards to kind of help communicate to those impacted. Designating storage site locations. This is again a good one that we found during the derecho, that having a location to put the debris is critical. Having enough space for these types of events is really important. We were fortunate that it wasn't very far away from where the incident happened, so it wasn't trucking it too far. But I would highly recommend, if you don't already, most do through the derecho, but if you don't already, have a spot identified where something can be stored for long-term and short-term, depending on the event. Street sweepers were big for us too. We had street sweepers out from the very beginning that Saturday morning till we were done cleaning up completely. That helped keep the nails and everything, the sharp objects off the road. So that way emergency service vehicles, Mid-American Energy could get in to do their thing. The streets were passable and opened up by the end of the day that Saturday. So within 24 hours, the streets were opened up and cleaned up to a point where vehicles could get through there, so long as Mid-Am had it opened up and ready. So we continued that, even loading that debris up. You're going to put stuff in the street again. So we just kept cycling that street sweeper around and just keeping things cleaned up. Utilizing partnerships, Metro Waste Authority obviously was critical in this, providing those roll-off containers so we can use those for loading. We coordinated a lot of pickups, drop-offs to our loading site. When we were hauling a lot of our storm debris, as I call it, down to the loading site, we would have a bin place, we would load it, and then at their convenience, they'd come pick it up and then give us an empty one there. So just kind of having that partnership. Polk County was they were amazing coming in. They were with us until that May 14th date when we kind of dialed it back for collections, picking up, significant amounts of both types of debris and really helping us out in that. It's pretty amazing to think within a month we were able to get things picked up. And then after action review, that was something that the city did internally as well. We wanted to talk about flaws. You find them through these events, areas that we could definitely fix, but then also, celebrate the successes, the communication that we had at our level. And I think flaws were very easy to find a lot of them, traffic controls, we need more of those, message boards. Obviously, in these instances, we need more of those. So we're not as reliant on others, but you learn a lot through there, and that's why it was a good process to go through to kind of help recognize those and kind of build off that for any future events we might find. That's pretty much my portion of it.
Thank you very much. And then speaking from the site collection, ultimate collection site disposal.
Sure. Leslie Earlbeck, Chief Operating Officer at Metro Waste Authority. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone today. I've been with the agency for about 14 years. And so my background early on is in the work with the community, specifically around the collection of all materials, spring cleanup material that you spoke with, yard waste, storm debris. And so this is speaking kind of to the heart of a lot of the work that I've done early on in my time. And unfortunately, it seems in the last several years, we're only being called on more and more to help be part of the solution in response to these growing storms in severity. And so I was on staff with the initial storm debris plan that circulated over a decade or so ago, where Metro and Polk County Emergency Management went to a lot of your city halls, and your elected officials actually voted on the plan, providing education to them about the importance of knowing that there is a plan, why that plan is in existence. And, the first thing I always like to think of when unfortunately these storms occur is that the last thing that a lot of people are thinking about is, where does this material go? And what's the best way to dispose of it? And so I fully acknowledge that, as a lot of you are on the front lines and you're dealing with people who have been displaced with homes, loss of life or severe injury, gravestones, all of those things are really, really important in the big picture. And thinking about, like, how do we get this garbage into a hole isn't nearly as critical of a conversation in the short term. But that's why there is an agency such as Metro Waste Authorities that is existence, is because we are here to advocate and posing those questions. And we're not typically at points the fan favorite, because we're often challenging not just what's the easiest way to make this go away, but what's in the best interest of the entire region. And so just to take a quick step back, if you're not aware of who Metro Waste Authority is, we're a 28E. So we're owned by 16 communities in Polk County, and then also the county, Polk County. And then we also have another location, a small landfill in Perry, serving Dallas County in that capacity as well. And so just to kind of put to light, in recent years, like the last probably 8 years, we've played a very unique role, first in the formation of the original plan, but then specifically what we have seen is that every storm kind of has its own unique personality, as we just heard in Pleasant Hill. And so Metro Waste Authority played a unique role when the tornado hit in Bondurant, as well as the derecho, the ongoing high winds, and then most recently when the tornado demolished portions of Greenfield. We were up there, even though that's not even part of our service area. When you hear their plan is to bring the waste to your site, you find some unique ways to get in front of people and help be a influencer of decisions. And so while I said, a lot of people aren't thinking, how do we separate pallets from metal? And in some cases, that's just frankly impossible to do. One decision that we were really able to influence in Greenfield is that we had found out that they were planning on sending entire neighborhoods within hours to our very small landfill in Perry. And if that would have happened, we would have ultimately probably been without a landfill in Perry for several months, because putting that material in the landfill at that location would have just eaten at the life of, like, the big fancy hole in the ground, which ultimately affects our long-term plan to serve that county for the foreseeable future. And so we were able to compromise. Most of that waste was actually able to be sent to Mitchellville. Perry seemed like the fastest, easiest answer, but when you looked at the time that it took to transport to either of the locations, it was a 15-minute difference, pretty small in the scheme of the people that are doing the transportation, but very large in terms of impact to the overall community long-term when you're looking at not being able to operate a landfill for 6+ months if you have eaten at the capacity of that. And so our goal, Metro Waste Authority's goal when it comes to managing storms, and I always have analogies, and given there's a lot of men in this room, I'm not sure this is the best analogy, but if you know me, I'm gonna walk through that analogy anyways. If you've ever had a baby, or if your significant other has ever had a baby, you often have a birth plan of how you think that that's going to go. And I think storm debris management is very similar to that. You know, we can have this plan that we're putting in front of all of your communities, but one, if your doctors don't know that that plan exists, i.e. if your staff don't know that that plan exists, or if your elected officials don't know that that plan exists, it's only as good as the knowledge of the people who are aware of it. And so you need to have as many people on staff that have bought into the intention and the purpose and the value of that plan before it has to be executed. And that includes many of your frontline staff as well as your decision makers. And I think a lot of times we want to keep our elected officials at arm's length. They can make, I'm just, you know, it's okay. I can say these things freely. I know a lot of people are thinking it, and so I'll just say it. But with all due respect, right? I mean, they're here, elected officials are here, and they're dictating our policy. And day to day operationally, a lot of these decisions that we're making are definitely within the threshold of staff to orchestrate and bring to light. And that's what we're charged with doing. Unfortunately, the elected officials are getting the phone calls from residents and are being asked to have exceptions. And so if we don't demonstrate the awareness that the plan exists and the value that it has way before the plan is even needed, it's so challenging and nearly impossible to come back from that. And I know some of you are slightly shaking your head, some of you are grunting, but I know all of you have had experience in this. And so one of the areas that I would love for Metro Waste Authority to partner with all of the cities is to help you tell that story ahead of time. We can be a little bit of the bad guy in explaining the value of utilizing the plan and turning to it very, very quickly in the event that a storm at any size happens. If people's limbs are coming off of their trees, your residents are calling. And so to have a plan in place at whatever that size is really critical. And so our staff at Metro has come up with what I think is a fairly to digest chart. And so would love all of your feedback. Doesn't have to be in the moment, although I'm pretty informal, so it can be in the moment as well. But the goal of this chart is just to be really forthcoming that there are a variety of ways that folks can go about specifically removing storm debris from neighborhoods, from residential properties. And there's pros and cons to all of them. But as we've talked about, it starts with an assessment of the community. And so getting out there and being on the front lines and realizing exactly what it looks like, and what kind of damage your city specifically is looking at, and not your city as a whole, but your city as pockets. And so what I would really encourage is that you don't always have the entire city is going to approach it in this fashion, but you're dissecting your city into quadrants of some sort of size where you can figure out, you know, maybe there's literally no damage in some aspects of your community, and it could be minor, moderate, major, or catastrophic in other areas. And so the more able you are to pinpoint which areas of your community really need those resources, it allows your resources to go into the most impactful way possible. And again, probably another really bad analogy, but I think about it like, it's really easy to go through the drive-through every night and get like a quick meal, but that eventually adds up, right? And over time, when you look at your overall budget, you're like, gosh, like where's all my money going? And you look at it and you're like, well, man, we're really spending a lot of money eating out rather than cooking at home. And I would say same analogy goes with your storm debris, where in the moment, it can be so easy to give in to the residents and just go do that free collection. But it's really not free, and it's coming at a large cost to the cities. And in an era where city budgets are tighter than they ever have been before, I think for the elected officials to understand the real costs associated with those cleanups isn't just their right to know, but it's our responsibility in the roles that we are to raise that up. And I know of some communities in the last year that have done the free collection, which feels really good to the resident in the moment, right? Like the storm came in and we were able to swoop in and take care of it for them. But what a lot of times we overlook is in this one particular community, they did two $50,000 cleanups last year for storms that would, in a majority of the community, be deemed minor and maybe in small pockets moderate. And so that's real money. And so I think, again, for folks to understand that the plan exists and it's there really to protect the city, but to provide the resources in the areas that are needed where you can be the most impactful is really important. And so what this chart identifies or aims to identify is that at a quick glance, the storm comes through, there's this pretty chart in here, you flip to it really fast and you remember, okay, how would we classify this? Would this be minor? Would this be moderate? Would it be major? Would it be catastrophic? And then to raise up the pros and cons that are associated. So specifically under consideration, you're going to see across the chart, there's reference to what's the cost to the resident, what's the cost to the city, what is the physical requirements that are needed of our residents, what are the physical requirements and logistics and planning that's needed of the city, and so on and so forth. And so, I would love to say that the regional approach is a one size fits all that's going to work in every storm. And then that's simply not true, right? But I do think that there's tremendous value in having our go-to plan, your birthing plan, that you can reference back to and then realize, okay, well, what are the very unique instances that we need to take into consideration? And there's a lot of those, but every storm has its own unique personality. I'd never been associated with a storm before where the city was taking into consideration the impact on a cemetery like Pleasant Hill had. Or in Greenfield, where their emergency management team was 2 weeks on the job and completely overwhelmed. Those are real variables that need to be taken into consideration. So the plan is there to try to create a regional approach. If I could wave a magic wand, what I would love is for all cities to go out and assess the storms in a similar fashion, and then to divert back to this reference of based on how we would deem or categorize these quadrants of our community, which approach is helpful. Because as many of you have experienced, when we're not consistent as a region, the residents use us against each other to get what they want. And so they'll call and say, well, across the street in Windsor Heights, they're doing this, but in Des Moines, they're doing that. And it becomes really difficult to maintain your ground once those conversations leak into the decision making, we've lost. But ahead of time, when at some capacity, all of our staff and our elected officials know, and they get the calls from the residents and they say, why did we get a free collection last time and we're not this time? To be able to have those couple talking points to speak to the fact that there is like logic and planning and strategy associated with this. And it's not just, how the wind is blowing on that particular day, brings a lot of credibility to the decision-making process, and people can sense that. So Lastly, I would just highlight, the role that Metro Waste Authority can play. And that is as unique as to each of the storms and the communities that you're serving. We have brought in equipment in the past, and we've helped on city property to do cleanup. I have a list of a wide range of equipment that each of our sites can deploy depending on needs. We manage the contracts for garbage, recycling, and yard waste for many of you in this room. And you may or may not be aware, there's a clause in that contract which dictates that if you have contracted services with Metro Waste Authority, that you are eligible to receive like first chance disposal support from your haulers, not for free, right? But in the event that there's multiple events happening across the state and you could be reliant on out-of-state haulers to come in, it's really nice to know that your community haulers in your back pocket and they're available to provide those additional services and can provide quick quotes for you to do that. I think that's all I have for right now. I have a communications background, so you give me a microphone and that comes out of me.
That's perfectly fine. There was a couple things that you mentioned that I wanted to highlight. Select area pickup. That was something that several communities did last year because the tornado path was either very small and there wasn't a huge area of damage, or that it wasn't a citywide disaster. A lot of communities did that targeted area pickup last year and saw pretty big dividends from it because it reduced how much debris they were hauling away. It actually concentrated it all and you could get it done relatively quickly because a lot of people put that word out that, hey, we're going to do curbside pickup for this area. They saw all that debris come out, all that vegetative debris come out to the street relatively quickly. Within a week, a lot of people had it picked up. They may have made 2 or 3 passes to get all that debris, but it went pretty quick. Transportation too. So how it's being transported plays into effect on what's going to be accepted and when. We saw it with, I'm pointing at my National Guard folks. They went up and did Sioux Rapids and Spencer. Spencer was a little bit different than Sioux Rapids even. Sioux Rapids, they picked a location. They originally wanted them to haul it all the way to Carroll, which if you're not familiar with the area, that's an 1.5-hour drive. And their trucks are not set up for that. So they set up a temporary pile. They contacted Secondary Roads, their county public works, and they arranged to haul it away. Spencer actually set up a debris pile at the fairgrounds. Everything was hauled to that location and then it was ground up at that location and then hauled to the landfill. So depending on how you're going to do it, changes what the process may be. Grinding it up, you're going to be able to get more debris onto the truck than if you leave it whole.
And in many instances, I mean, we're talking about storm debris. If it's the household material like coming out of Greenfield, we actually required that be ground up. Matt, do you remember the tonnage difference of what they were getting in a side dump, ground versus not ground?
I think it went from 3 tons to about 10 tons after it was ground.
Yeah, so 3 tons on a side dump without the material being ground, 10 tons once it was ground. And so you're saving so much on the transportation, but then that correlates to a very real cost of the life of our landfill. And so the efficiency that you're saying, yeah.
Hi, Mike with ESA Iowa Demolition. So we actually did the grinding in
Okay.
Greenfield, also in Spencer and also in Minden. You got 40% more in a truck after it was ground. So we did about 2,000 loads to Metro East. So you can imagine, saving 40% on trucking on 2,000 loads.
Yeah.
So just for a good reference.
Thank
it's
you,
about
yeah.
40% density, and then also going to you guys is 40% with the top cover. So it's huge, the grinding.
Thank you.
Had a question for you. Do you guys have rail near any of your facilities? And have you guys consider that as a transport option?
We don't currently. There's one facility, our recycling center, that there's rail near, but the spur is not there. And so that's unfortunately not an option to us right now. Good question.
Can I mention something on that? On the Greenfield one, it also took Metro Waste Authority to be the bad person with FEMA and Homeland Security and such on that phone to say, we are requiring it to be ground, right? Because they were not going to grind it. They weren't going to pay for the grinding and all that. It took a couple phone calls. And then for us to even say, "It's not coming to us unless it's ground." We knew why it was coming to us to ground was because you would triple your loads. They wouldn't buy into that. And until we said, it's not coming to us until it does. Then it was being ground the next day, right?
Some of this stuff, some of this equipment we don't have either. So it's gotta be done through a state contractor. It's gotta be done through a contractor as well. So I'm not ignorant to that fact that we don't own all the equipment. The last point that I wanted to hit on it, we saw at Pleasant Hill and the White Oak tornado was insurance versus curbside. The homeowners, they contacted their insurance right away. A lot of them had roll-offs within 2 days, 3 days.
Yeah, that was something that we were seeing too. We tried to get that messaging out as well, that under the homeowner's insurance, they provided the roll off. But again, the problem is a lot of people pull it out anyway, because that's just what they're used to. So having that messaging early on is helpful.
But that's also something that we're not able to control as Public Works, Emergency Management, anything like that. Did you guys have any problems with insurance roll-off companies coming in? Because I know you had a ton of roll-offs out and about within the communities going your direction.
So Metro is not hiring them, and so I would say that we're pretty limited in our risk or vulnerability in that they would be hired either by residents or cities, and so but that is an important factor, is for people to vet those for credibility sake. I think we talk about FEMA a lot, and I know before I got heavily involved in some of these processes and decisions, there was just kind of an understanding or notion in my mind that the storm's bad enough and FEMA comes in, right? And so I think it's really easy to like go into cleanup mode and think like, wow, this is a really, I mean, in Pleasant Hill, it's like the tornado hit. This is a really bad storm. And especially as I was talking through that on the call with you guys, I remember just assuming that there would be reimbursement. And so I think the story that you walk through is a really powerful one in terms of the cleanup efforts and how severe it was in some areas. And yet you still didn't reach that FEMA threshold. And so every time we take action, we're setting a precedent of how we are going to handle the storm response in the future. And that is both in terms with FEMA, but also our residents. And so, you know, in the case of Pleasant Hill, then, and I think you guys did a tremendous job. Not sure if you guys would do anything different in terms of the cleanups that you provided or not, but not reaching that FEMA reimbursement, that still is a historical precedence now going forward, that eventually, you know, there could be another storm that comes through and FEMA is going to look at the way that Pleasant Hill responded to that last storm, and whatever they did or didn't do can be used against them in terms of, well, why are you asking us for reimbursement to take care of your citywide collection when you've historically done that in the past? And so that's the importance of this plan. And probably if I had one talking point with elected officials, that it would be around that every response that we have to every storm, minor, moderate, major, catastrophic, is part of our narrative as a city and as a region about how we are responding, and that we are putting ourselves in jeopardy for future reimbursement. If we get into a pattern, we automatically come in and provide free collection. On that note, I will say, you know, the Compost It program is available in most of the communities that are in this room. I think that our marketing team, as we speak, is actually creating very targeted messages, knowing storms are coming this season, that doesn't talk about our yard waste collection program as in, hey, it's yard waste season, put your lawn and garden trimmings at the curb. But if a storm has hit your residence, you already have access to storm debris collection every single week in your community. And that Compost It is a storm collection program just as much as it is like your weekly collection program. And so I think that there is some misinformation from our team to help you guys overcome with your residents. I think that there's one, just ignorance that maybe some people don't use the program on a regular basis. If you're like me and you chose a home without mature trees, it's not something that you're faced with regularly. But then the storm's bad enough and all of a sudden you have no idea how you're supposed to get rid of it. The second piece, though, I think is wishful ignorance, where they know exactly how to use the compost it program, but it requires manual labor and buying of bags. And residents want to assume that the city's going to come in and provide that for free because that's the easy button, right? And so there's some conversations I think to be had about that, but all of that equals potential reimbursement that is or isn't available for FEMA. Any questions about that? Yeah.
No, I appreciate the comments, but the reality of it is each storm is different. You've admitted that. Sometimes it'll be southeast Polk County, sometimes it's northwest. Each community will have to make its own decision based upon the amount of damage, and not everything would be picked up in your composted package. If we have larger limbs,
Sure.
that's not ultimately hauled away, et cetera. So again, every community will have to make its own decision. And the sooner we communicate that information out, as Russ had said,
Mhm.
I think it's extremely important so that people understand we need separate piles of debris and what we will or won't pick up, and whether that's community-wide or, again, like you said, a targeted area, which I know happened with the Des Moines 5 Urbandale piece that happened last year. So,
That's a good point. I mean, and I hope that that's what this chart, I don't know if you got one, but I hope that's what this chart is conveying, is that the compost it program is available in the instance that it's minor or moderate. But it's not the answer to everything. If you're looking at major catastrophic, there's different solutions to those different levels of storms. And I would never, I mean, we are a regional entity. And so of course, my perfect scenario is that the entire region approaches storm responses in a similar fashion. That would be incredibly ignorant. I've been doing this for 14 years. And I know that that would be a complete little like wishful thinking. There's a lot of different dynamics. I mean, there's some communities that frankly don't have space to hold any material on site to do the grinding on their own. So I would never suggest that somehow you bulldoze a building and make space. That's just not realistic in that. But and that is why Metro Waste Authority is here, is because we have walked through these storms. We're very aware of the different nuances in different communities, including space, budget, elected officials, personality, residential demands. And we're willing to meet you wherever you are. Our goal is just that as people are making these decisions, they go in eyes wide open with the pros and cons of each. That's what we want you to have, is all of the information to make the best decision for your community.
So one other thing I've got, we've said it several times, FEMA threshold, FEMA threshold, FEMA threshold. I want to clarify that for those that don't know. There's several different thresholds we have to hit. One is the county threshold. Polk County being the most populous county, we have the highest threshold. So a lot of storms, if it's hitting one city, we're not gonna meet that threshold. Then we have to meet the state threshold, and the state threshold is about 2/3 again higher than what our threshold is. So we have to meet both of those. We can still request for public assistance or individual assistance if we don't meet those thresholds. It gets heavily scrutinized, and the likelihood that we're actually going to get it if we don't meet those two thresholds goes down significantly. So for Pleasant Hill, it just so happened we didn't have that much statewide go on. And we did ask for it. It was, hey, you guys aren't even at your threshold yet. During the May tornadoes, a larger impact area because they included the flooding, they included more situations. So that got to a higher threshold relatively quickly. But even the snow in January, we hit the threshold for that. And FEMA said no. So it happens all the time, unfortunately.
I guess one thing that we didn't discover, but we were very fortunate in our instance, is to check the insurance coverage you have as a city as well. Usually there's some policies out there that we were participating in that covered expense for damage to trees on public property. So that was kind of a big benefit that we were able to use to kind of help drive down and save some of those costs. So that's something that I would recommend cities do as well, in addition to making sure structures are covered for damage, because that's something else that people think are, but it's always good to double check.
So with that, the other last minute ones?
My last minute one, because I wouldn't be true to those that have heard me talk on this topic if I didn't raise up. So now what? Overall, there is a lack of elected officials that are in this room right now. And it's truly my belief that we can have all of the brain power and all the planning around this topic and all the areas of expertise. But if we don't have the buy-in from the elected officials who ultimately are going to dictate how the city responds to the storm, the plan is only as good as what's executed. And so I guess my question to all of you is, how do we take that next step? How do we build awareness and/or buy-in from the elected officials to help make your lives easier?
One suggestion that I would offer is, I think you spoke to it, Leslie, is that education of the, lack of a better phrase, consequences of certain actions in terms of setting that precedent and maybe potentially having, Polk County EMA with, the holders of the debris management plan that we've all adopted. That's the thing that all the cities need to remember is we adopted this county plan. There's just some communities that chose not to follow it last year. That kind of doing a roadshow maybe with going direct to council meetings. I know that's a lot of work and a lot of time, but I think it's time well spent because I think these events are going to get more frequent and not less. So I think it's important for all the city councils to be having that conversation. And I think as a part of that, to the FEMA point, is I think there's going to be going forward less and less support from FEMA for these types of events. So I think every city needs to, or county needs to be having a conversation of not just some of the technical pieces of, do I have storage sites when a debris incident occurs, but also do I have the resources, whether it's in our cash reserves that we maintain as cities or other reserves to, have the resources to support these kinds of events, because I think it's less and less likely, it's my personal opinion, but less and less likely that FEMA is going to be there to support us. And I think that's also a state conversation that needs to be had in Iowa. As we have a lot more, you just look at last year alone, it was spread all the way across the state. Some very, very impactful events that had a lot of impacts. And I know there was a recent piece of legislation that was passed that the state is starting to stand up a little bit more resource. But I think we have a long ways to go in terms of what that looks like for Iowa. And so I think it's an opportunity to maybe have some of that dialogue of educating on, here are some of the consequences or the potential long-term policy impacts if you make a decision or deviate from the county adopted plan, and what implications that may have for even, I don't know what implications that could have for other cities in the county when we have a bigger event. If there's one city going this way that's, not following the plan, and then like 5 cities that are following the plan, and if we are going after a big FEMA declaration, I don't know if there's consequences there, maybe there isn't. But I think it's something, I don't know if there's a clear answer on that. So I think we're all in bed together a little bit on that to a certain degree.
Good point.
But I mean, educating on that, and then also having the conversation. These events are, we're in Clive, we're having this conversation of, we had kind of a, debris management response plan generally, but now because these just even basic wind events are happening so much more frequently, how are we doing damage assessment? And I applaud the county for taking the lead on the Orion app, and how do we collect this data more centralized and have a standardization, at least of the data collection, that I think is going to be really important. And the training of making sure our damage assessors are assessing it fairly consistently on the minor, moderate, and major. I think that's going to make a big difference if we do have a major event across the county. And if we have some communities that are calling everything major, and another community that's assessing it on the Orion app as minor, moderate, and very little major, if we have these inconsistencies, it could really work against us in the long run.
Very valid point. So with that, I'm gonna open it up to questions. We're down to 5 minutes. Sorry, Brad, I'm stealing your thunder here. But questions from anybody about anything we've discussed or haven't discussed?
I really don't have a question, but to your point on the planning, so, between doing Greenfield, Minden and Spencer, it happened a little bit at Greenfield and it happened quite a bit at Spencer. And that's once everybody in the county and other counties found out that there is a dump site, we started seeing massive amount of trucks come in with, out of state, out of county plates. We addressed the city of Spencer. They didn't, they said, well, we didn't even think about that. So they didn't know how to police it. And it was just happening so fast that they were bringing in stuff. They were also bringing in stuff from new construction. So the early people who got their houses gutted were doing the new construction. And then all of a sudden we're seeing drywall, we're roofing shingles and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think it'd be good to have a good plan of, hey, how are we gonna just have the people who got affected and not everybody in surrounding counties bringing in their stuff in? We brought in a lot of stuff from the other counties and Spencer. It just came on so fast. They didn't think about it. It happened a little bit in Greenfield, but Greenfield kind of put a stop to that pretty quick. The other thing is when people bring the stuff out to the curbs, when they put the notification out to bring it out, they didn't put in there not to put it by fire hydrants, not to put it by phone boxes, and not to put it by telephone pole guidelines. And there is a lot of bad mishaps. So, if you want to stick that in there, I know Spencer didn't do that at all. They did on the second notification, but the first one they didn't. And we wiped out a lot of phone boxes.
Those are great points, Todd. Thank you. And we see people taking advantage of whatever collection option that you might offer. All of a sudden people are trimming their trees for their free city collection too. So something to take advantage or to take into consideration based on whatever response the city chooses.
So in our debris management plan and also in our public works ESF 3, we actually have those roles and responsibilities. We don't have them included in the plan, but they're all attachments. We didn't get rid of any of that stuff. So it's all still there. It's available to use. So if we needed to do site inspectors or any of that stuff, we still have all the rules and responsibilities. We can hand those to everybody if they need it. So if Russ would have needed truck monitoring, I have a truck monitoring one. I can hand it to him. Go, here's the rules and responsibilities. If you have a volunteer that's going to do it, here's what they need to do.
It gets out really quick where the storage site's at, so a lot of trucks like to find it.
Cameron too, if, similar to what Metro Waste put together here, I think if we do a road show to all the councils, having a kind of a one pager or something that really boils that debris management chapter. Yep. And we'll say the key things that elected officials need to know, I think would be very helpful for, take lead behinds for a meeting, something that staff can share more broadly too. That would be helpful. I mean, I think you have the content you need in the chapter for a reason, but I think really, boiling that to what elected officials can be impactful on.
Yep.
Would be helpful with that roadshow if that is something that is implemented.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I'd like to make a comment if I could. I promised Leslie I wouldn't engage in this discussion.
I can only give you 30
It
seconds.
was all hers. I got it. 30 seconds does it. I do want to hit on her point again and ask this, because I do know that it's an Achilles heel of every city. We just met with West Des Moines about it the other morning. Happy to meet with any of them. My name is Michael McCoy. I'm the CEO of Metro Waste Authority, but Leslie is truly the brains behind all of this debris management, and she'll say everything else, but we are willing to meet with all of your cities. We're also willing to get in front of your elected officials because those are hard discussions. But I can tell you, I'm looking around this room and I won't name them by name, but there's 5 of them I see with shirts on that elected officials made the decision on what the debris cleanup was last year. I'll say that, right? So how can we help with that, right? We can only do so much, but we will be direct with them. We'll come to your council meetings, we'll talk to them, we'll do some of your workshops. Perhaps hearing it from us might be a little different than your staff doing it and delivering it. It's a little tougher when your staff's delivering the message. So we're happy to do that as well. Take advantage of that. We'll just, have direct conversation with them of how that affects the city, your own city, how it affects the region, Metro Waste and other things. Lay that out in front of them. And will we still have a little of it? Sure. Right? They're getting the phone calls, and whether it's 2 phone calls, the phone calls are flooding in, right? Or if it's 20 phone calls, the phone calls are flooding in, is what they say, right? So I say that with a little bit of gist of, I have another hat that relates to that piece. And so happy to take that on for you. Leslie is.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, we'll wrap it up. I do ask if you can take a minute or two before you leave to fill out the evaluation. You can either leave it at your table or drop it off with Patty on the front on the way out the door. We appreciate any feedback that you have on today's session. And of course, my usual plea for any future topics you would like to hear about or to present about. We love to tailor these to what you guys, what everyone here would like to hear about. So any future topics you'd like to see, go ahead and jot those down, and we will try to work those into our schedule. Thanks again for visiting, and we'll see you again in the future.
Chicken was very well loved. So